Okay. So yeah, I will be hitting a lot of different areas, and some of these concepts are either not new to you or repeating some of the things that you probably have heard in many different ways. Let's just agree that there's lots of areas that are probably new and probably not so new. I will try to take a couple of chunks of breaks so that we can go over a few things. We got plenty of stuff to touch on, and yeah, there's just a lot here. My whole goal for today and being here in general is just to provide value. It's straight up, plain and simple. The whole idea of me getting involved was basically I've been in your shoes. I've been a founder many times. And if I can save you 1 hour, 1 day, 1 week, 1 month, potentially even a whole year of frustration because there's either a tactic, tool, or some type of supplementary way of getting something done, then fucking A, I've done my job. So the first thing that I wanted to talk about before I get into some of the tactical and practical stuff was the nature of probably where most of the startups are right now. You should be at a phase where you're trying to get that product market fit crystallized and get it to a point where excessive growth is a given. And what I've often found is most people ignore talking to potential or existing customers in order to continue to strengthen their solution. And I understand lots of people have done this, so I'm going to race through this stuff in order to get to some of the more interesting things, but I do think there's value in here. So, why do we talk to customers? It's about learning and discovery and discovering the known knowns, the known unknowns, and the unknown unknowns is really where we need to start to categorize these things. I often find myself not talking to my customers enough because I get in the weeds. We all do, right? And so I'm able to derive so much value out of those conversations. It shifts my priorities almost every week that I sit down and have these dialogues. And if you're not doing that, let's say 10% of your week, I think you're missing a huge opportunity. And the things that you can glean out of that stuff are listed here. Everything related to your industry, the different pain points that maybe aren't obvious to you, the different ways that people learn and engage with the types of content that you're putting out, the different distribution and community channels that are unknown to you, the different types of buyers, and all of the things that go into being a person that would buy your product or service, whether it is B2B or B2C. I think you can learn a lot about somebody. I'm not going to do a Forrest Gump impression, but with a very minimal amount of information, understanding exactly what they're capable of doing and how they interact with your product. Now, I've used lots of different tools to measure that, but I found a lot of the conversations to be gold when speaking to people. So, the number one activity that founders can't farm out, because I'm a huge fan of buying back my time, is customer interviews because the learning curve is just like it's impossible to mimic. If you farm this out, I think you miss some of the gold. So, I had an experience where one of my earliest startups was a company called Architecture Quote. It was basically an AI aggregator to pull in architecture projects and potentially through government tenders apply automatically and win projects. Through talking with a lot of the people that were supposed to be buying my solution, I found myself thinking they were stupid, lazy, pretentious, incompetent, liars. And ultimately, I realized, wow, I need to get the fuck out of this. So, if you're finding that you're speaking to your customers and you have a great disdain for them, either you need to find the beauty in the details or you need to start figuring out why you don't like them. It's a huge learning curve if that is your situation. But yeah, food for thought. Y Combinator, probably the most prolific accelerator on the planet, says that the two primary goals within every startup prior to getting a massive round of funding is talking to customers and building their product, and everything else should be ancillary. So if what you're working on right now is not related to those two things and you don't have enough money to see your way through to 6 months from now, your runway is somewhat limited, then you need to focus on those two things. So I've always tried to focus on revenue, so getting signups, the product MVP and roadmap, and then clarity, are we on the right track? And that kind of gets to product market fit. Our mission in terms of what we're trying to do for people is just provide a better solution. Whatever their problem is that our platform or our solution or our product fixes, it should be fixing that problem. So we should be asking ourselves on a fairly regular basis, does this solve our problem or sorry, their problem? Are they happy to pay us? Are they thrilled to pay us and they can't imagine living without us? If not, why not? So I often try to categorize everything that I do, and you'll see that in some of the templates that I'll go over. But there is a big difference between qualitative data and quantitative data. And I promise this is going somewhere. I know this is probably rudimentary at best, but I promise I'm getting into where we're going to go. So qualitative data, insights, opinions, experiences, and basically there's a lot of interesting deceptive elements that come out of those from the standpoint of like questionnaires, surveys, interviews, and observations. Sorry, I meant descriptive. Quantitative data is the stuff that we can track. So that's either on Amplitude, Mixpanel, or some other platform tracking tool. You probably have something over top of your website. So that could be Matomo, that could be a Google Analytics, whatever your kind of go-to is. But this allows you to put numbers on a scoreboard. And ultimately, this is what really gives you some value in terms of presenting this to investors. Investors won't look at startups these days that don't have traction. Traction comes in the form of numbers and metrics that you can immediately put in somebody's face and basically be like, yes, we have money coming in. It is safe to invest with us. There's different tools for measuring qualitative and quantitative data. I'm a huge proponent of using some of the platform tracking tools that are listed here. Amplitude, probably my favorite in terms of measuring user flows. KISS metrics and Mixpanel are close seconds to that. Ultimately, it really depends on your stack and what you're building. But yeah, I'm a huge fan of making data driven decisions, not I think, I feel, I know, I believe, and so on. So I often find myself having this explanation of what marketing is under the umbrella of the mom test. Now, there's two very different types of marketers out there. You kind of have your data-driven marketer, which I consider myself to be, and then you have storytellers, which is fine. Like both need to exist. I can be both, but ultimately, artists or storytellers have a leg up when it comes to conveying to the customer what this product or service or solution that you've created actually does. So when you talk to customers, they're often going to lie to you, which is mind blowing. Like, why would somebody lie to you? And it's because of the mom test, because mom doesn't want to make you feel bad. Most people don't want to impart negativity onto somebody that they don't know all that well, or maybe they do know very well. So you have to frame the questions in the right way so that even mom can't lie to us. So one is like, don't share the idea up front. Focus on learning about their understanding of the product based off of your narrow stipulation of what you've given them. Anchor discussions subtly and pivot away from very bland, long form explanations. I try to understand past behaviors, current behaviors, and fact finding as I'm doing that. I ask about specifics within their past to understand what they've done leading up to coming into my solution. And there's lots of good questions. When was the last time you did X? When or why did you do X? And what was the tool that you used for that? Have you tried other methods? What do you currently solve by using this problem? Why even bother solving this problem? What are the most consuming? You guys can read. You get the idea. I try to avoid hypothetical and go for like really narrow stuff because that's where I'm able to tease out the most amount of value. I try to ask specifics about their past, and there's a lot of bad questions that kind of come out of that. So, like, would you use my app for X, Y, and Z? Would you pay for this platform? Do you like the idea? We're fishing, right? We're just fishing for somebody to make us feel better about what we've spent weeks, months, or even years building. Don't do that. Just try to get the information out of them without trying to float your ego. And we all do that. I found myself, again, bullshit app, terrible name. It was an app that was basically building a marketplace for people that had food allergies. And the thought process was like gluten was this evil thing. And this was like back in like 2011 or something. And yeah, we saw a gap in the market, or at least we thought. So we had a lot of customer interviews where I would sit down with an iPad and go over everything, and I was asking them all these questions, and they were like, "Yeah, I would definitely use this. This looks great." And I realized that until I kind of like folded everything up and was heading out, and I'm like, "I got to know, would you actually use this?" And they're like, "Absolutely not. No fucking way. Why would I shop for food this way? And if I was going to buy something online, I'd go to Amazon." And I realized like, oh, awesome. So like to thank them for their time, I was giving them Amazon gift cards, which is basically like, go to my competitors. And also, I wasn't asking the right questions. I was basically asking them questions in order to float my own ego. So we have to just be aware of those things. Staying consistent on all this stuff is relatively easy once you kind of get a format and a way of doing that. And I tend to kind of block everything out into categories, but I usually set a goal of what I'm trying to understand. I prepare a list of the questions, I set the expectations, at the very beginning of the call. I use different tools for tracking and then being able to convert those into real findings. I document those and then I go again. And again, like I would say it's 10% of my week when I was building projects and products myself. I always try to figure out what my target customers want. And if I can't figure that out, then I'm usually in a weird spot. So, like, there has to be something that motivates them to use my product. And that motivation can take the form of these things. It can be social. So, like, they want to look cool, feel smart. They want to sound interesting to other people. Maybe it's job security. Maybe there's a physical benefit because they want to look better. They want to get healthier. Maybe it's economic. Maybe they want to be recognized at work or amongst their family or friends. Or maybe it's like an achievement version that kind of fits into all of these. You really have to narrow that down and figure out where that falls with the majority of your customers. I always try to prepare a list of learning goals. That way, I'm not just kind of like grasping for questions and running out of stuff to ask. It should be pretty easy, but you probably have hundreds of problems that you need to validate based off of some very simple questioning and getting at some of the habits in order to understand either their language or the industry language. I mean, obviously, it depends on B2C and B2B, the frustrations, their knowledge, and kind of where the gaps are. Again, avoid fishing for compliments, fluff, and generating like half-baked ideas from people that aren't like going to get it. There's lots of different avenues to meet people, and I'll go through my way of doing that with a lot of outreach in a bit. But you can look at some of the most prolific startups that have ever been. And yeah, I mean, depending on the nature of the product, they found their customers online, in person, or otherwise. So meeting people online may not have been a thing during COVID. It certainly is now. And you could see that like Dropbox was able to really capitalize when they got on other forums. And I'll show kind of different ways of getting into other people's watering holes. If you don't have a massive audience because you're not a massive influencer or content creator, you have to go to where other people have drawn a large cluster of people together that you can capitalize on by getting a much bigger reach than it would ever occur if you were just posting on your own social media. Netflix also basically hooked a bunch of customers the same way on bulletin boards, groups, and forums. Start to figure out where those are, and I'll go into a few different ways of how those break down. Online user testing is the biggest fucking waste of time that you will ever spend money on. I do not recommend it. I don't think that you're actually going to get any value from it. And often it is a money grab for people that don't have any. So if you've ever used user testing or something similar, you'll probably remember that it basically requires users to log in and then go through a couple of very quick tutorials or a couple of quick steps and then give feedback. If you are going to do this for validation because investors or your board is saying do it, then fine. It's really easy to build these things out. I just think that they're a waste of money and time. And yeah, I think like I had this epiphany moment where like this bro was like munching on fucking Cheerios as he's giving feedback. And I'm like, why am I doing this? Like, this is the most like biggest waste of time. It's a college kid that's trying to make $8 on a Saturday. Like, it does not make sense to do this online version of things. I like talking with people in person. This is how Snapchat took off. This is how Airbnb took off. There's lots and lots of founders that had to go boots on the ground and actually meet with people and start by getting their first customers by engaging with strangers and running them through a demo of the product and asking questions and so on and so forth. I don't think anybody here really has the money to be able to do user testing in terms of like sitting down with large groups. I don't recommend this at all. Groupthink is such a crazy thing. My background, by the way, is psychology. I had planned on being a neuroscientist until I found out that there was zero fucking money in that. So I moved on. But there are so many inherent biases that exist when you are doing user testing by groups. So always isolate the person in order to make sure that you're in a good spot. There are so many different versions of this that I could spend hours talking about this, but the whole idea is Ash conformity is basically a study that showed that people want to conform to the other people around them. So if somebody starts speaking up about one particular thing, everybody else falls in line. It's crazy. There's also the Hawthorne effect, which is we make false assumptions based off of how we are observing something. So the concept was they thought that if they put lots of bright lights inside of a factory that people would be more productive as far as workers go. Turns out when there's people walking around with clipboards making sure to see if people are being more productive, turns out they are going to be more productive because they know they're being watched. So just a long way to go to say that be aware that there are hundreds of biases that I've linked inside of here. And if you connect with me on LinkedIn, I'll hook you up with the slides. It is what it is. Again, I know I move fast. I just wanted to get a large portion of stuff out of the way before I get into some of the different channels and outreach, because I think that's where the real value kind of sits. And I don't know, there's good stuff in here. I don't mean to like throw all this stuff under the bus, but it is what it is. So acquiring your first 1,000 customers, most of you, I did a little bit of peeking. It seemed like you're either there or nearly there, which is fantastic. A lot of the different accelerators that I've worked with are way behind the curve. So finding your first 1,000 customers can come in different segments. It really it amounts to you testing out different channels, whether it's online, offline, friends, family, creating some form of FOMO online, anywhere. I mean, there's so many different ways to do that. I try to,
Ted,
yes,
sorry for interrupting you. Maybe if we have the time, we can see the startups that are with us, what kind of channels they use, and maybe we can get some input from your side on, their approach to things, and if we have the time for that. But yeah, I don't want to interrupt you. Keep going, please.
sure. Yeah, I'll definitely pause for questions before I get into outreach to make sure that I have some framing for that. That's a fair point. Segmenting customers in terms of the types of people that you're going to reach out to. I did see that there was a larger portion of folks that are in the B2B space, but of course there are B2C people. I will touch on that. And there is a big difference between reaching out to people from the bottom up, meaning the person that will actually get the most value out of using your platform, tool, or solution versus the top down. So yeah, I think the thing that I got the most out of in terms of doing this user outreach and speaking with customers was having to kill off my darlings or kill off the features or functions or parts of my platform that I had spent the most time on or thought was the most important thing, but it turns out it didn't matter at all. And I think there's just something about us, it's human nature. Like we fall in love with the things that we create, and therefore it's really hard to kill those off or shelve those because it's like, but I spent all this time. So it's just what is, it's how it is. I'll go into how do we do outreach at scale a little later, but I would say that there's a lot of unique qualities to doing outreach as a founder, and being able to ask for advice is sometimes challenging, but I've found that if you ask for money, you get advice. If you ask for advice, you get the money twice. That's from Pitbull. But yeah, I've found that everything kind of breaks down into a very simple format. And so you're welcome to screenshot this or connect with me on LinkedIn and I'll send you that. But this is a, I would say, medium form version of reaching out where I basically explain my vision, I frame it, I explain my weakness in order to put them on a nice pedestal. I reassert the pedestal, and then I have an ask. That's the whole idea of trying to frame out section by section or line by line my outreach. You don't have to read it all. There's lots of different versions, and again, I'll hook you up with this if you connect with me. So, like the big thoughts on this is customers don't always know what they want. They do understand their pain points and their experiences and their issues way better than you ever will, or at least way better than most founders do. Not talking to your customers is probably worse than asking the wrong questions or getting false signals. Cool. I will pause. What kind of questions or thoughts do we have on this stuff before I tear into a whole different section?
Guys, please make a raise of hands if you have any questions so far. If not, I suggest in the meantime think about what potentially Taylor can be of assistance with in terms of questions. I think you still have some more things to go over, Taylor, I
Yeah, yeah,
believe.
dude, I always bring way more slides than needed, so trust me, we
Yeah.
we'll get
Always
this show
prepared.
going. Cool. All right, so switching it up. Cool. So a lot of these visuals are taken directly from one of my more recent courses. So bear with me. There is a, let's call it like, video game element to this. It's just, I always try to explain things in metaphors, so bear with me. It is what it is. So I wanted to uncover some of the ideas behind different growth channels and the tactics within them, and help people to understand the nature of any tactic will potentially work, depending on whether or not you're doing it with the best possible yeah, systems and tools, but also tactics. So any tactic or channel will absolutely work. So many methods probably get better attention than others, but I always break them down into direct. So I am directly going into somebody, like pushing towards them, or indirect, where they come to me and I pull them towards me. And there's unique angles for every single channel that exists. There's always going to be a cool and interesting way that somebody thought up that was a unique approach that hadn't been done quite the same way, or it's a repeat of something, and it gets exploited until everybody does it so many times, and then it's ruined. You'll see this with gamification, you'll see this with specific channels, you'll see this with like very simple tactics, you name it, it exists. The whole idea behind this is basically like the default bias or stadium cues. So like people get stuck doing the default option in ambiguous, what is it? Ambiguous situations. So basically, if somebody's like, well, you got to build a lot of content. Like content's where it's at. Everybody knows that's fucking marketing. Problem is with LLMs, you're essentially not able to get found organically anymore. The amount of people that are using any type of LLM, so that's DeepSeek, ChatGPT, Claude, whatever your go-to is, they're using that in order to get information rather than Google searches. So you coming up organically, maybe it's not as easy as it once was. So doing the standard thing, not always the greatest methodology for getting some form of measurable success. The other way of looking at this is the availability heuristic. So we sometimes drift towards either the path of least resistance or what is the most immediately, easily accessible bit of information or channel. So sometimes the most obvious stuff is not what we should be focused on. I think unique angles fall into these categories. It's gimmicks, it's gifts, it's something that seems thoughtful. Personalization is massive, providing a unique experience, pairing two very uncommon things, a demonstration of tech skill or knowledge, or a resource. If what you're building right now doesn't have any of those things in terms of your go to market strategy, your customer acquisition model, then I think you need to kind of sit back and have one of those, I don't know, get stoned and think about it kind of days, because I think this is where a lot of the companies that end up being these massive massive organizations figured out how to tap into one of those. In order to get real meetings, like if I'm trying to reach out for new customers, or if I'm trying to reach out and find new individual users to do user interviews, ultimately there is going to be a very obvious push and pull, direct where you go to them or indirect where they come to you. There are many different ways that we could break down direct channels. So there's in person, there's analog, there's outreach. There's many different ways for indirect channels. So that's putting our information out there in terms of getting it out on social media, having us listed on different directories, getting ads out there if we feel so inclined and we want to drop some money, or getting referrals from people that are already pushing to those people and very present in the channels that they exist. I can tell you without a shadow of a doubt, there are lots of people out there that say, "Oh yeah, yeah, dude, okay, dude, I know SEO, I know social media, I know ads. It doesn't work. It doesn't work for me. It doesn't work for my company. It's not the right fit." And it's like, okay, well, I get that, but what happened is probably you may have chose the right channel, but you could have maybe not chose the right tactic, but for sure you had poor execution and you did not have a unique angle. Bad targeting, landed in spam, too generic, zero customization, no fucking offer. There are so many people that are like, yeah, I tried this and it doesn't work. any channel, whether you're sending out postcards, knocking on people's doors, it will work if done properly. It's just what is the most scalable version that you're willing to actually put time, effort, and energy into. The whole idea behind growth hacking is what is the biggest outcome that I can get for doing the least amount of time, effort, energy, and potentially money in order to get that result. I want to do a one for one on rare occasions, and sometimes we have to do things that don't scale. So, like an example explored would be like showing up and hand delivering an offer or hand delivering, a potential, yeah, I guess like postcard to somebody. That probably doesn't work if you show up at somebody's house. It unlikely to work at somebody's office, but if you really have a KOL, basically key opinion leader, or somebody that you're really trying to engage with, that is the difference between you getting a massive pilot project or integration with a large platform, then I would figure out, hey, where's their next planned appearance? And I'm definitely going to hand deliver that and have a conversation with them. There's lots of different ways of doing this. And no, that doesn't mean that you're showing up in a weird, creepy way. And yeah, nobody does that anyway. So like that's not even on the table. Moving on. So watering holes. I alluded to this briefly, but I think that there's a lot of value packed in that, especially with the ability to use tools like DeepSeek. I use Monica, which is basically like an aggregator of a handful of LLMs. It allows me to build out massive resources, and I'm able to use these massive resources in order to, at scale, do something with large collections of information. Let me go into what watering holes are. Watering holes are where your customers go to vent, like bitch and moan, ask questions, learn, get answers, get inspired, get some type of help, meet other like-minded people, find other hobbies that are somewhat on the fringe of maybe that particular group, shop, some type of leisure, maybe even entertainment. Think of watering holes as like in the savannah, like all the animals at some point have to go to drink, and that's where people that you are trying to sell to live, exist, and occasionally show up to do these things. We're not always going to find people that are actively top of their head. I am definitely looking to buy an education LMS today. It's not a thing. So there's distribution channels, and these are channels where basically they're personal or related to a professional company where they are the ones that are pushing out lots of other stuff. And on the other side of the aisle, there are community channels, and community channels, excuse me, allow essentially anybody to potentially come in and control the conversation or hijack the conversation. And those, to me, are some of the more interesting ones because you can start to create some really interesting angles. If we're talking about community channels, realize that 90% of people that are inside of community channels, and I think that number is probably higher, are view only, meaning they don't do shit. They don't engage, they don't like, they don't comment, they certainly don't share. All they do is look at stuff. There's a smaller percentage of those people, and those are engagers. Those are people that are actually willing to like. I'm sure we've all met these people where you're out at a networking event or a meetup, and they're like, "Hey, I saw that thing that you were posting the other day," and it's like, "Oh, you didn't like it?" And it's like, "No, dude, well, I give you that kind of time of day. Like, wait, what do you think I am?" Happens all the time. So realize that there are plenty of people viewing whatever is happening in these groups, but are not necessarily the ones that are posting anything or engaging anything. The last group is the content creators. This is such a small sliver. It's 1% of people that exist in any sort of group within any sort of channel or platform that actually post. Therefore, if you are posting within any of these community channels, you are amongst the 1%. Now, you can't be over the top commercial about it, but yes, there are lots of different ways to do that. So I try to collect everything and I break them down again by categories. So I break down, let's say I know that my users hang out a lot on Facebook. Then that means that I'm going to collect all of those individual groups where people that might be interested in my product or service would potentially go in order to get informed, get educated, bitch and moan, all those things that I talked about. So that when it comes time for me to start putting information into those groups, I have them at my fingertips. There's lots of different ways to repurpose these watering holes. So these groups, that list that I showed you across any individual channel, can turn into all sorts of content. So you can release it as a blog post. You can release it as social media curation, meaning I can go through, scrape every single one of those groups and look for the most engaged piece of content, or maybe the top 10 pieces of content that had the most comments, the most likes, the most overall engagement, which means proof of concept. If it worked over there, it's going to work over here. So I can repurpose any bit of content that has a high level of engagement and either throw it into a different group, but obviously tailor it to my messaging and represent me, my company, whatever it is that I'm trying to do, or I potentially put it on a different channel and use it for my publishing in order to get more engagement for me. It's basically like lots of experiments happening all at once, and all I'm doing is collecting it and putting it in my own words, talking about me or my company or my mission, and getting people to engage. You can find problems, solutions, lots of different audience engagements, the different targets that never existed. You can find lots of different inspiration for ads. I do a ton of scraping, so that's kind of part of my jam. I've found interesting people to be part of my expert roundtables that then turn into KOLs and promote my solution. It can explore new avenues for partnerships and opportunities to learn, get into newsletters that are massive, massive ways of spending literally zero money in order to get in front of potential opportunities and audiences. That's one area, right? So there's industry publishers. Lots of publishers exist that are unique to your niche or your particular vertical. And that means it could be blogs, it could be news, it could be private Substacks. It really just depends on what you're looking for. And yes, there are searchable platforms that allow you to aggregate and pull together all the Substacks or all the newsletters related to a specific keyword, key phrase, or niche, which means like, hey, great. I'm a small startup. I would love for you to mention my small startup because your audience seems like they're perfect for me. And once in a while, somebody goes, yeah, sure, no problem. I've no issue whatsoever. Let's do that. This also means that, yeah, on occasion you can pay to play. So lots of publishers are accepting articles, aggregating the articles either directly from your competitors' backlinks or aggregating articles from these different publishers that you found, allow you to figure out where should I put my information so I have the highest possible chance of converting people that would find my product, service, or solution interesting. I already covered newsletters. It's the same kind of thing. But wait, there's more. Yeah, videos, right? So I always try to figure out like what are people looking for when they're trying to either learn something or understand something. So right now, YouTube is still the second most popular search engine. With like TikTok, it's slowly like creeping up, and I catch myself kind of doing searches on TikTok as well in order to figure out how to do something or find something because I don't want to watch a 10-minute tutorial. Right. So that means that there are lots of interesting tidbits of content where I might be able to extract all of the top videos from the standpoint of what people are going to look for when it comes to learning about my product, my solution, understanding how to do the thing that my solution does for other people. And I could scrape this directly from competitors and from influencers. Why is this valuable? Well, I could make my own version and potentially draw a lot of traffic from that, and that does work. I could potentially use that as inspiration and stuff to kind of float as like a drip feed to my users because I don't know, maybe it's powerful. If I have a little bit of money laying around and I want to use that as ad targeting, I can also do that. So YouTube ads allow you to target on individual specific videos, which means if I know that my competitors have this particular tutorial that has a crazy amount of views, then great. I'm going to make sure that my video comes up as an interstitial ad before this video shows, which gives me a chance to sneak in before they watch, this training video or whatever it is. There's lots of different like avenues, gimmicks, and angles, but these are just a few, right? I think those are some of the fun ones and some of the ones that I've had success with, but it really depends on the nature of your business. If you got some money on the side in order to spend on this stuff and whether or not you're willing to experiment until you find kind of the right balance of everything. Online and in-person events, especially when you're trying to tap into tighter communities, is where you get the people that are going to be your prolific affiliates and referrers, meaning the people that are willing to, at any given moment, talk about you and hand you off to a new customer, which is where we want to be. Like that's like I think it's the Airbnb founder that was like, I want to find like the fanatical like top 100 customers because all they do is walk around and tell people how great my company is. We need to find versions of that, and we need to create versions of that. So I do the same thing with aggregating watering holes. So I find all the webinars that are within my niche, all the online conferences, all the podcasts, live streams, you fucking name it. I'm grabbing it and collecting it. And of course, I want to reach out and say, like, hey, I would like to be a keynote speaker. I would like to be a guest. That's why I have 170 keynotes in my background, because I've done this at scale. You can also do this with in-person events. And I think the in-person events, while they are not as scalable and they do take a lot longer and they take time out of your day in order to go and come back and all these things, they have so much more value because people are like, oh, I got to meet the founder, blah, 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 blah. And those are the people that are fanatics. Those are the ones that are recommending you to mom, brother, dad, sister, cousin, all their coworkers. Obviously, you have to have the right product to be able to make that happen. But I found that, yeah, even if you only have like two or three solid presentations that are all not all about you and how great your product is, you can go really far. I mean, I've seen two or three keynote presenters at a few events where literally they just run the same damn presentation for like the last 5 years. So you don't have to become a professional speaker in order to do this. You just need to find the events that you can get into and have a couple of chambered presentations that you can kind of switch in and out of. It is what it is. So yeah, I collect lots of these events, and these are kind of the typical data fields, so that then I can enrich them and run outreach through a couple of different automated tools, which I'll go into and how I do it. But there's a lot of value in this, and honestly, I know it's not always the most scalable, especially with in-person stuff. But this is really where you start to build up some interesting plays when it comes to affiliates and referrals, especially with yeah, online platforms and that kind of thing, which I assume everybody here is. I again like to repurpose and reuse and rinse everything. So like great. So if I spent the time collecting this massive list, then maybe I have something here that can turn into a here are the top I don't know 500 events within name your industry or vertical of 2025. This could be social media curation where you're basically putting out like here were the 30 best events, here's the 5 best hackathons, here's the 100 webinars that existed, whatever. There's so many different ways to do this. I just try to repurpose literally everything that I do. I'll go through a couple of very small, subtle categories and make sure that, yeah, I've covered everything, and then I'll take a little pause. I try to gather and obtain as many jargon, bullshit buzzwords as I can to make sure that not only I have the ability to cover them organically with content. So if there is a jargon term that is specific to either the niche or the product type that I'm building, then I want to make sure that I have something that in detail covers what that is so I get organic traffic from that. Usually, definition posts were not that valuable in the past. They're becoming a lot easier to make, and I still think there's value to be driven there. So, I turn a lot of these collections of specific jargon terms related to the people that are either my customers, my niche, what they talk about. I use that for training materials. I use that for web copy. I use that for blogs and all the other things listed here. Makes it a lot easier, and ultimately like it makes you look like yeah more or less like the knowledgeable person in the ecosystem. Last thing that I don't know, two more things. Statistics. I tend to put out statistics posts in order to either drive points home or make people feel like they're getting the most out of using my platform or solution. You can twist up data in order to disprove gravity if you really wanted to. But I do find value in having these at will, especially when training sales folks. So I use statistics for all things that make me look good. And if you start down the path of finding an intern that can research these and teach them how to use a few different LLMs, maybe a mix of like Perplexity and DeepSeek, I think you're able to build out some pretty powerful stuff that you can literally, using N8N, turn into a content engine within minutes. Um, like, not even kidding. I also do this with quotes, but I think quotes are kind of like, like sisterhood of the traveling pants kind of stuff. So take it for what you will. I do use quotes when they come from social proof. So that means any type of feedback, positive reviews, testimonials. Most of the websites that I've seen do not have enough of that within this cohort. And I think people just don't realize like, oh, you have to ask somebody to give you a review, or you have to ask, can you give me like a little like short snippet so I can put up some numbers like really good stuff on my website, most people are like, yeah, sure, I don't give a shit. Like, of course. So any type of social proof, really helpful to have across the website. And the last one is questions. There are so many different tools that allow you to do that. And nowadays with LLMs, I don't even think you really even need these tools. But the whole idea is, what are the questions being asked around your particular niche, product type, industry, you name it, where and what are people asking, and that allows me to then start building content, but it also allows me to figure out, is this something that I have to answer within the platform? Is this something that I need to really break down for people, because there's like a huge search volume and not enough results of this stuff. It really just depends. I also use this for sales training, so when you're using Fireflies or Otter AI or any other meeting recording tool like I do, I always extract all of the questions that I have with individual customers, or questions that I'm being asked back when I'm doing customer interviews and or user interviews, and I use that for training purposes. So it allows me to basically come up with the decision trees of like every conversation. So like the top three questions that every customer asks after I've gone over my demo, or every user seems confused by, how do we mitigate that? So this is an example of what I did for a blockchain project where people were confused. I used the stoplight method. So yeah, red is bad, like throw out. Yellow is like uncertain if this is right. Green is good. Yep, let's go. And these other two colors were more like ask Taylor the question before before publishing this. And yeah, then like teal would be like make that into a social media post that's fire. You guys kind of get the idea. Like, there's so many different use cases for just aggregating questions and that kind of stuff. I'm gonna move on. Likes and dislikes is super simple. I try to use an understanding of what people really hate in order to form memes or content around that, because it's fun and I need a little bit of downtime every once in a while. But it also allows me to find out what what most people in my target or niche are really frustrated by, or really like to joke about, or like to engage with. But yeah, it is what it is. Likes and dislikes can be really interesting when you break them apart, and you can start to figure out like schemas and stereotypes, and whether or not you want to talk about those, or whether or not they're a reality, or it's just like kind of a ghost within the data. But it does make things really interesting. It allows me to categorize stuff, and ultimately it allows me to make fun memes, as well as talk about the pain points, and then on the other side of it talk about my benefits. Whew. All right, so that's that's a lot. um, any questions about that stuff before I go into how I do targeted outreach?
Any questions, guys? For me, I do have a question, but
Sure.
I think maybe that's the later point. Because like in the cohort, we have about like, yeah, so we have one question now before I ask mine. So Sammy is asking, how do we keep the top 1% of content creators activated and happy?
Incentivize them, right? So so there's lots of different ways to incentivize people. One is to create a affiliate campaign or a referral campaign. Referral campaigns are really easy because, like, yeah, you're like, okay, well, for every person that you refer, I'll give you essentially more credits on the platform. If it's an affiliate, it usually means that there's an incentive there where you're paying them. So the idea would be, and I can go into a few different presentations on this, but yeah, I would say with affiliates, you have to come out of pocket. The only things that I would stipulate on coming out of pocket in order to incentivize people is basically to say that when they refer somebody and the new person signs up, they have to be a paying customer for a minimum of 3 months before they receive a payout. Because yeah, lots of people try to do I don't know, silly things, and yeah, that's the nature of what is. So and I was trying to find a website that I've used more recently. WAP. Why am I sharing on? Fucking idiot. Hold on, you guys can see. Hold on. So,
Sorry. By the way, Taylor, if there's anything that any content that you'd like to share, of course, we share your LinkedIn with them. They can connect with you. But if you have anything that we can share with them, we can you can just send it over to us or to me, and I can just send it through email or some other kind of communication method.
Okay.
But yeah.
Yeah, WAP is basically a really interesting incentive model where, based off of the user generated content or UGCs, you can incentivize like, hey, if you get 1,000 views on whatever you post, I will pay you $1 per 1,000 views. Now, you're also able to set caps. So if they get 1 million views, you're not on the hook for whatever the multiple of that is. But it is an interesting avenue, and I've seen a lot of creators that I have some respect for getting on here and finding products to shill. So this is one way of potentially getting KOLs, key opinion leaders, or content creators to basically talk about your stuff in groups that you never found, never knew about, never heard of. But lots of different like angles and tactics, right?
Okay. I do want to ask you about something. So I was saying that we have about like 13 companies with us. There's like about four categories. So some of them are like more into language learning apps. The others are more coding, robotics, cybersecurity. We also have sustainability, math education. Some are employee benefits. So what would be your recommendation in terms of how can they determine what's the best way to for outreach and yeah, basically just to understand what they need to target.
Nice. Well, that actually leads me to my next slide. So why don't
Okay, then
yeah, why don't I just do
you
that?
can answer it later if you want.
I mean, yeah, let me go right into that because I kind of knew that that might be a thing. So, company discovery, this is all kind of part of the angles of outreach. Outreach is a huge value boost if you're doing it correctly. And I realize like a lot of people are like, dude, but we're like, name name the excuse. We're B2C. Oh, but we can only talk to these types of people. And it's like, okay, I got it. Yep. Like I will move past targeting eventually, but there are always angles for doing outreach to individuals and to companies. Now, if you are in Europe, you cannot do outreach to individual people at scale unless you, I don't know, want to get fines for not being compliant with GDPR. But there are always going to be partnerships. Partnerships come in so many different flavors. So there's investors, where of course you always want to be talking to people that are willing to give you money. Then there's media, PR, and publishers, and I covered a lot of those. There's event partners, I've covered a lot of those. There's content partners, which I just showed you with that platform WAP. There's also, I would say, within that kind of vertical, you have social media groups and people that are admins of those groups who constantly are flagging posts. And it's like, dude, stop flagging my stuff. Then there's integration partners, there's marketplace partners, there's affiliate partners. There are so many different subgroups of partnerships that you can target that will give you access to their watering hole, their ecosystem, their influence, that this potential one partner could be the difference of you potentially getting 100 more partners or 1,000 customers. So to me, I'm always doing some form of outreach. I always think when I'm doing outreach for sales and I have a software as a service solution, I try to first go and figure out who are the people that are screaming from the rooftops. I need somebody to do this. And it's like, oh, you're hiring accountants? Dude, I do accounting software. Or, oh, you're hiring like 10 customer success people? Like, why are you not using like some type of help desk automation solution slash chatbot? Like, what year is this? Oh, you're looking for salespeople? Like, oh, you should be working with an outreach automation services company like my marketing agency. Those things are really easy to find because they've demonstrated their need. You know they have money because they're hiring, right? That people aren't going to get paid nothing to do the job. And they're indicating that they are in the market right now. We just need to start to tap into those, and I'll show a few different ways of doing that. But companies aren't hiring, or sorry, aren't hiding, right? So we're able to figure out very quickly where these different companies exist just by using a couple of very simple searches. So there's lists, there's directories, there's platforms, there's manual search, and there's lots and lots of B2B tools. I'm happy to go into lots of these verticals if there's interest. I will cover the different B2B tools from the standpoint of different B2B business to business searchable databases that give you free access in order to search, filter, and then eventually scrape. That's not part of the paid solution, but you could aggregate a lot of information without necessarily having to pay for it. There's startup listing or just general directory platforms that give you access to all sorts of companies. By the way, if you don't have GeekWire bookmarked, I don't know what's going on. GeekWire publishes on a fairly daily basis. Not that link. Let me get this one. Oh, that's frustrating. Give me 1 second. I gave
Take your time, take your time. I'm sure there's a lot of links. I can see a lot of links, so it can be confusing.
This is their recent funding list, and I use this list especially when I was consulting with a couple of different VCs and startups to basically find out like who's throwing money at these early startups. And you get to see the amount, you get to often see who the lead investor is, which to me is all I need to basically go, oh, you just gave money to those guys? Well, I'm not a direct competitor because in conflicts of interest, they wouldn't want they wouldn't want to invest in two identical startups. So if they're in ed tech, then it's like, oh, all right, well, you invested in this ed tech solution. I need to reach out to you. So this is updated as of yesterday, and every day they add a few on here. There used to be a really massive list that then eventually became a product, and yeah, I was so sad when it got updated. But lots of different ways, and I'll go into this stuff when I go over Spark Notes, but be aware that there are so many different ways of discovering companies, and I don't know how I bounced out of that. There we go. Cool. So I try to target by industry as kind of like the first high level, and then I start slipping down the rung by different targeting factors. Really, just is a guess and check kind of thing. This is what I do. I build out playbooks. So essentially, like I have my raw company list, and then it becomes time to do enrichment, and then I run an enrichment prompt, which then builds out all the messaging that I would want to do, and then I run that through my outreach tools. That's like a whole kind of breakdown thing, and I'll go into some of the finer parts of this. But what I was alluding to a moment ago is what I call spark moments. Spark moments are basically when is somebody going on a spending spree? When is somebody basically indicating to me like, hey, I'm literally at like the edge of my seat and I'm handing my credit card over. What do I need to do? Good timing is everything, and if we can solve for timing, we have something pretty amazing. So that comes in the form of B2B customers really visibly and very publicly, and that is funding announcements, that's announcing there's a new office, that's publishing PR stuff. There's lots of different ways of discovering that. So I've listed out a few of those, and that's here. So I know it's more of a B2B thing, but you should be able to figure out what are the spark moments from a B2C standpoint for those that are not in the B2B space, where somebody instantly has that realization, fuck, I really need insert the name of your product, solution, or service. If you can solve for that and it's actually a real thing, then yeah, like you're off to the races, you're good to go. So I've broken it down by startups. Obviously, we're not all targeting startups. So maybe it's like large companies. You're looking for some version of either integrations. You're looking for a quick win of, I don't know, acquisition. Maybe you're looking for a pilot project. There's lots of versions of that. There's external Spark moments. There's internal Spark moments. I'm happy to give you guys access to this. Like there's really a lot of different ways of looking at it. Boom. And then from the standpoint of like if you were trying to figure out what those looked like and were doing that on a more scalable way, I would potentially create Google Alerts, or I would create something in the way of a Feedly request, which would allow me to basically anytime a company that has this particular key phrase in its PR announcement has listed this, then find the context based off of this, write the message using this template, and then automatically generate the email and send it out. That would be like the more advanced workflow. Manually, it would just be a matter of like every once in a while going in and figuring out based off of these PR websites who's listed that a huge initiative for the next 6 months or 5 years is that we want to educate the youth of America, or we want to be the first AI influence company to do X, Y, and Z. Like, figure out where you fit in, but you find the angles, and I mean, it's the internet. There's everything out there. So, lots of different ways to do that. Spark moments are a thing. I'm a huge fan of figuring those out. They just take a little while to kind of uncover those. And then once you kind of recognize the repetition of it, you're like, okay, cool. I just need to duplicate this instance and look for instances that are like one step of the imagination away. I've covered funding announcements. I mean, that's a resource like anybody can get to. I'll put it in the chat. But yeah, there's lots and lots of places where you can find that. I, again, like a bit more of a blockchain guy, so that's there. And I have some other resources in there. Go nuts. Cool. All right. I've gone over PR search. Cool. Spark moments give you this really amazing opportunity to come off genuine, but also at like seemingly like you understand everything about someone because you hit them at the right time. It shows that you've done your research. It sets you apart in a really good way, and it's a perfect setup for future talking points. So when I was trying to do outreach as a marketing agency and I saw that they were either missing a marketing department or they were trying to hire a few different roles for that marketing department, it was a slam dunk where it's like, I am cheaper, faster, more experienced, and 1,000 times better than any dipshit that you're going to plop in there. Give me 5 minutes to explain how we can save you time, money, and reduce headaches, and you will never think twice about ever doing XYZ or hiring said role that your product solution or service replaces. There's so many different avenues to do that, but you can literally scrape job boards all day long and send out those messages if your product or service replaces somebody or something within a large organization. I've seen some really interesting tactics that take that personalization route a little bit further back. So, like, everybody loves compliments. Everybody's favorite subject is themselves. So, if I can find really interesting high level people that key opinion leaders or like C-level folks or even founders or I don't know, large kind of larger than life people, I want to reference something. So like I'll go through and figure out like who are all the CEOs that have been on podcasts, who are all the CMOs that have done keynotes and so on. And I run outreach basically giving them compliments about their podcast or their keynote or their appearance. And then of course I'm slipping in, here's what I'm up to. And yeah, you'd be surprised. Like compliments get you everywhere. So I try to search by Spark Moments to figure out, is this a viable methodology? If yes, where else can I aggregate the data from? Where can I and then enrich that? And then how can I incorporate that into outreach so I can run outreach at scale automatically for the most part and consistently? Why does outreach work? Well, outreach allows you to be extremely targeted and it has basically unlimited potential depending on your total addressable market. It also allows you to stand up and be like, hey, here I am, because there's a lot of circumstances where people don't know that your product or solution exists. Of course, we do, right? And we're really close to ourselves. Like, I'm amazing, and everybody should want to use my startup's product, solution, or service, but they don't know that you exist. So, yeah, sometimes people feel icky about getting into somebody's inbox, but you're not going to have that opportunity otherwise because it can't always be a pull situation where people find out about you organically and show up. I've highlighted a few different ways of doing that, but I would say that isn't always our opportunity. I've always found that when I'm crafting the right messages, I try to do a little bit of improv. Now, I was never a fucking theater kid, but I do think yes and is really important when you're interacting with these people. Add new information, don't block concepts when you're trying to have a conversation with them, and present this idea in almost a playful way because it's serendipity. Like, people are weird. And it's like, this is crazy. Like, you guys just announced, like, you have this whole initiative where you want to work with startups. I'm a startup. How crazy. And it's like, yeah, I fucking spent like ridiculous amounts of time trying to find you. I need to sell to you. Sit down with me because I'm exactly what you need. It's crazy. It's just how it is. So I always try to get people to do 3 different connections per company. Now that obviously isn't possible when you're targeting people who are doing individual keynotes. But if I'm targeting just a broad company and I don't know who I should specifically speak to, I find somebody low level because they'll be my cheerleader. I'll find a director just below kind of the management level, and then I'll find the C level, maybe even a founder, depending on the size of the company. I always add a personalization note. This is the manual way of doing it. And then I try to incorporate that spark moment in the form of either complimenting based off of the spark moment, their company, their career, blah, blah, blah. And yeah, the whole idea is like it works. I think a lot of people suck at giving compliments. No offense to the Europeans in here, but I think either the Brits or the Americans kind of won that game. I think we just deliver small talk effortlessly. But there's this really amazing creator named Troy Hawk. I love his stuff. I'll put the link in there just because like I'm so tickled by this dude's way of just approaching strangers. But yeah, I think if you had a bit of that when you were doing networking and you're going to conferences or you're at meetups, it will change your life. It's just impressive, and every once in a while, I think it's valuable. I do a lot of work in the Nordics, and they suck at engaging with strangers, so I have to at length talk about how you can be an adult and still talk with people you don't know. Let's move on. So I do usually this in an automated fashion. So I'll send the connection request automatically. Once the connection request is accepted, then there are three automated follow-ups. I've already talked about Pitbull, but here we are twice. So ask for advice, get the money twice. The whole idea is if you're really trying to hit as a small startup a home run with a pilot project, a new integration, or a big time customer, ask for advice. People like to help other people and feel helpful, especially when flowered with compliments like you're the biggest, best, most impressive company out there. I would love nothing more than just to understand your journey and how you got to where you arrived. And that's where you actually get this like, yeah, come on, like I'm happy to supplement this every once in a while. I I don't know. There's lots of different outreach templates. Everybody has their own way of doing it. You're max 300 characters, but I go into that in my next segment. So, yeah, before we get into running the outreach automatically, be aware that there are reasons why your outreach will not work. One is your profile. So, if it says sales in your profile, fucking change it. There's no reason to talk about sales. I don't connect with salespeople. Most of you are founders, so you see how many things hit your inbox where somebody is selling development services or some bullshit marketing. Um, change your headline so you seem more approachable. Your messaging, so if you've sent more than 100 connections and you have zero people accepting, then your angle or template isn't right and it isn't working, or potentially your target market isn't there. I've certainly had a lot of experiences with different verticals where the people in that industry, they're just not on LinkedIn, and that's okay. Like there's other platforms, but not LinkedIn. And then, yeah, I guess that kind of covers the targets, and then the channels. Like LinkedIn isn't everything; it's just the one that I tend to use the most. So a big kind of thought here is basically nothing changes if nothing changes. I know, whoa, that closed out automatically. Did I lose you guys? No,
No, no, we're here. We're
that was
here.
super weird.
I think maybe just the presentation
Yeah, right.
probably crashed.
I think you're right. Yeah, give me a second to pull that up.
It's okay. Take your time.
Yeah, like the last kind of note on that subject was basically, yeah, if you're not
Ah, there
comfortable,
it is.
yeah, if you're not comfortable like doing any of these things, I understand, but like you have to make an effort in order to get new either momentum or revenue or opportunities from a channel that maybe you haven't played with. And that's kind of what my next set of slides are about. How am I doing on time, by the way? I think I'm all right.
It's okay. We have still like I think like 15 minutes, but maybe it's we can leave some time at the end for any potential questions or
Yeah,
any kind of things we can share.
sure. That sounds good. Cool. So let me give an intro to LinkedIn automation. I'll do that with a little bit of a story. So my parents wanted to print wedding photos. I got married last summer. It was great. And yeah, they're like every boomer parent. They're like, we got to put fucking photos all over the house. We got to do that. So they received the photos on Google, and basically I was like, yeah, download all the photos, select your favorites, transfer to a thumb drive, and then go to like a print shop somewhere, and then yeah, you can print and frame them. And we jumped on a call, and 45 minutes later, unable to locate the thumb drive once it was plugged in. We had two different computers going. We had opened different internet browsers and we're still struggling to do that. I could not get them to access Google Photos. I had screen share. I had the ability to try to take over their screen, but they couldn't figure out how to download the thing. You name it, we ran into 1,000 fucking problems, to the point that yeah, 40 minutes, like no fucking traction, like nothing had happened, no progress. It ended with like a weird beeping in the background. You have downloaded a virus. Download antivirus now in order. And I'm like, don't download that, like a whole thing. So why am I sharing this? Because you need to know your tech limitations. I understand that many of the startups in here are uh, backed and built by people that would consider themselves tech savvy. But if you don't feel that you are tech savvy or you are unwilling to do the things that are required of you to learn in order to level up to do automation, in order to use different tools, then you don't have to. Like, I mean, manual is okay. It's just significantly slower and less scalable. And on a long enough time horizon, I think you'll end up getting significantly more value out of learning the things that take a little time to learn. I've worked with an ag tech startup for 3 or 4 months, and I can't get the guys to pause for 2 hours in order to look at a N8N automation setup that would essentially save them like $3,000 to $4,000 a month. And it's like, fellas, you don't have that money to burn. I've literally given you the template, and you're refusing to look at it because priorities. Like, I promise, to take an hour or even a day or even 2 days to learn how to do something that's going to save you 5 hours, 8 hours, 12 hours a week, it's worth it. It's so worth it. And there's so much access to everything now. So, what are LinkedIn automation tools? There's tools for literally everything. There's tools for targeting, searching, and discovery. There's tools for scraping. There's tools for just related to connection requests and follow-ups. That's kind of part of the auto messaging. There's tools that on top of that give you a CRM perspective. There's tools for engagement. There's tools for publishing. Everything, right? Now, the danger of using some of these tools is that LinkedIn is obviously not a huge advocate of people spamming. So if you are spamming, it means that you have the opportunity to get flagged and then basically warned. Now, they give you 3 strikes. So your first time, they basically don't ban you. The second time, they warn you and they ban you for a week. And the third time, they basically outright restrict you and don't give you access back in. There are limits that are set that you need to just be aware of so that you don't go over. Yep, there we go. Drinks on Friday. So these are the tools that collect. These are the tools, and don't use Apollo for anything LinkedIn related. It is hot trash. I wasted so much time trying to build an automation on top of that. I hate it. Um, Anyways, there are different tools basically. The next slide should have my limits. Yes, so the LinkedIn limits, and I will put this in the chat if you care to look at it, great. If not, not a big deal. But the idea is basically you get 50 connection requests daily when you have the premium LinkedIn, and then it is upwards of 200 weekly. Where's the here? Sweet. I'll get to why I'm saying this. I know that this is not like the most interesting thing. So yeah, what tools should I use? Well, literally any tool is better than no tool. Any tool that you are willing to use that saves you time, and that is the only valuable resource right now that most startups have at their easy to dispense kind of utility, then do it. You need to be able to sacrifice a little bit of money and hopefully a lot of nonsense in order to get back more of your time. LinkedIn is aware that more and more people need to use AI, but also automation tools. So they literally have an API that allows you to integrate with it. Why the fuck would they give you the chance to set up your API if they weren't approving it? I live in the Nordics, so like Everybody is super risk averse. And it's because there's this idea of ambiguity aversion. People prefer the known versus unknown risks. So if something is new and you don't fully understand the rules, expectations, or outcomes, that ambiguity makes people anxious or hesitant. So they don't do it. Literally everything that I've shown you today could potentially put you on a pathway to have a fuck ton of new customers. Unfortunately or fortunately, these tools are at your disposal. But the reality is, most people won't do them because we either get busy or we're like, it seems a little difficult. And it's like, I know everything worth doing is. But the whole idea of picking up these tools is speed, faster connections, volume, more connections, messages, and activities, which lead to real meetings and real customers and saving time, which again is the only commodity that we really actually have right now, but it is the most precious one, which is crazy. All right, so setup. I know I'm getting a little preachy. I apologize. Late in the day. So LinkedIn outreach flows, setup. So you need to make sure that you have a paid account. We'll go into some really simple targeting stuff. I'll show a couple of different tools for scraping. I'll show some messaging and different templates for that. I'll show the automation that I use, which is Walaxy, and then management within CRM, statuses, and tracking. Really basic stuff. So requirements. You're going to have to part ways with a little bit of money in order to do this at scale. So the LinkedIn monthly cost for LinkedIn Business is $59.99. For a few bucks more, you can get LinkedIn Navigator, which gives you a lot more, I would say, flexibility with using blasts at scale, but also targeting using a lot of their advanced filters, which I tend to like. Either way, 60 bucks, like you can afford to separate with that if you're going to use it. Remember the limits. I've already talked about that. And then we need to do some type of workflow mapping step by step so that we understand how we're going to actually integrate with the tools. Now, if we were doing this fully manually, this is what the workflow mapping would look like. So you find people on LinkedIn, you view the profile, and then you manually write a message. I am not advocating for that. Now, there are lots and lots and lots of different variables that you could plug in and different tools that you could insert into your stack in order to have a manual plus a tool, an advanced manual plus tool, or a fully automated stack. Now, everybody says, "Oh, I want to do it like fully automated." It's like, okay, there's there's a steep learning curve with a lot of this stuff. It will take significant amounts of time, and there's a lot of bullshit artists out there that say that they can do this stuff and they cannot. I promise they can. So you need to figure out what tools are actually doing this, and you figure that out by using the internet. So YouTube has an endless amount of tutorials from people that are either selling their services or potentially putting out genuine stuff. And yeah, it's sometimes trial and error to set this stuff up. Using N8N, I have not fully set up a fully automated outreach sequence because I'm not targeting a crazy amount of people right now with what I'm building. So I haven't done that. So I would say that there are lots of different stacks, but that's not the stack that I've set up. Let me go into targeting and show a couple of different versions of what that looks like, and then I'll get into the actual like setup and stuff like that. So the targeting segments we've already gone over: customers, pilot projects, integrations, investors, partners, trial users, events, publishers, you name it. The company targeting, I would encourage you to get Apollo. It's weird how many people have not used Apollo. I'm just going to really quickly show like the interface. So let's say I'm in Denmark and I want to target companies that are doing blockchain in Denmark. So let me just get in here real quick. All right, here we go. So I'm looking at companies. You can also target by people, but for the benefits of today, first I want to find the companies. So I'm looking at companies by location, and I'm going to type in the country, Denmark. Now, I don't know what your targets are, so it's a little bit more tricky there. Industry and keywords, it uses LinkedIn's keywords, so I would not use the keyword categories. So I'm going to do blockchain. And then I will do employees because this indicates the size of the company, which then indicates whether or not they can afford my products or services. So literally anything above 20 people, I'm cool with. 25 companies that do blockchain. That's why I don't work with Danish companies. So, so yeah, you get kind of like a little taste of that. If I were to break that out and just remove the industry, I'm going to get a crazy amount of more companies. People that haven't seen, it's baffling that people haven't seen this, where it's like, by the way, this is free, right? And using a very simple Chrome extension called Instant Data Scraper, guess what? I can steal all of it. I mean, I'm recorded. I can borrow it. So the whole idea is like, yes, at my disposal, I can literally do this at scale. Now you can also set up a number of really cool automations that would allow you to get past their blockers. So like, let's say that I locate the next button and I start crawling. It blocks me after 5 pages. I would be able to potentially just start from page 5, or I could use a couple of different scrapers. I mean, the sky's the limit. You decide whether or not you want to do that. But yeah, I I like doing stuff that's faster, that's going to save me time, money, and energy. So yeah, why not? Like it makes more sense to do it this way. So it stops me after 5 companies, but maybe those are all the companies that I need to target. I don't know. Something to think about. Let me jump back over to targeting. I've already kind of shown location, size, industry, and then keyword. You can get really creative with keywords. I would use ChatGPT, DeepSeek, or whatever your favorite LLM to start kind of running up different keywords. Then consider whether or not it makes sense to start targeting by some of those different segments that we talked about. So you have the B2B tools, you have spark moments, you have thought leadership. So that's people that are either event speakers or maybe they're posting, or people that are engaged on comments. And for those that are super involved with courses and learning, if people are taking courses on LinkedIn, by the way, you can see that. You can also scrape for that. Then I would want to reach out to the people that are in my target segment and be like, oh, I saw that you were taking LinkedIn's course on this. Did you know they suck and I'm awesome? Different ways of doing that. But usually, when people are learning about something within a vertical, it's a really easy indicator that they want to get more of that vertical. So, lots of cool and interesting ways of being able to scrape. I would say LinkedIn Learning is really easy, but there are lots of other not LinkedIn, lots of other course platforms that would be, I don't know, sometimes they give you some transparency, but LinkedIn obviously is a social media platform first. Cool. So let's move on. People discovery is kind of the same thing. And I think, especially when you're trying to get trial users or you're trying to get user feedback or potential customer feedback, this is what filtering by people is all about. Yes, you can target by very specific customer segment, very specific job title. It just requires you to build up a few of those things, and it doesn't take much work to do that. You just kind of have to work your way through it, build a couple of very simple prompts. I'll also give that away. Like, I mean, it's one of those things you don't need it until you do, and then you're like, oh, like I don't know what to target by. So give me 1 second, and I'll send that over. People targeting. There we go. So when I'm searching, I use positive filters and negative search terms or negative filters so that I don't want to have the wrong types of people inside of my lists. So I'm giving you guys that, and then I'll explain in a moment what I do. Okay, good. Sweet. Well, just to cover the last little bits, I do think that there's a lot of great outreach that you can do on a people level, depending on the nature of what you're doing. And I've given you the resource. I've already covered the different kind of types of people that you would reach out to. You have your C-level, your team leads, and then sole contributors. This is really how you start to uncover the different personas that are going to buy from you versus the ones that just constantly flake and don't give you the time of day. Personas are basically clusters or groups of people that give you the highest possibility of becoming trialists, signing up for your platform, or consistently the ones that are actually paying users. Lots of different versions of how to create personas. If you look up persona calculator or persona builder, or put in a very basic template into ChatGPT or whatever your LLM of choice, you'll be able to generate that. I take those people and plug them into different angles of my choosing, meaning maybe it's spark moments, maybe it's compliment question, just depends. Then I tailor the messaging specifically to their profile, and then the call to action usually if I'm selling is book a meeting. Otherwise, it's something to the effect of trying to get them to respond so that I can actually get them on a call or do something that I need them to sign up for. So yeah, I'll run a lot of different campaigns based off of lists and then determine based off of the list size what is statistically significant. Usually with statistical significance, you need lists of like 5,000 or more, which is not scalable or tenable on LinkedIn, but I will show you how I do that with email outreach. Real quick, people filters, I'm looking for keywords and job titles, and then I'm eliminating negative job titles. A version of negative job title is, let's say I'm targeting architects. Now, there's an architect that designs buildings, and there's a solution architect who designs databases and software tools. Number two is not the person that I'm reaching out to if I'm looking for the types of people that design houses. There's also certain job titles that overlap into different industries that are not a fit for you. They can be too junior, they can be totally irrelevant, or just filtering out bad companies. It depends on how you want to play the game. Deduping is really easy, and yeah, I have a whole like activity for that, but I want to save time and kind of get to the good stuff. You can do this with events. I have a lot of event discovery tools. Really easy to find those. I filter out events and then I either ask if I can be a guest speaker or maybe I just reach out to somebody and say like, hey, you seem like a perfect fit for my platform or solution. Real fast stuff on scraping LinkedIn before I get into doing email outreach. So there are different ways of doing this. There's manual, there's tools in manual, and then there's fully automated. I would not encourage you to manually copy and paste URLs. I think it's a giant waste of time. There are tools that allow you to basically have a like phantom browser that basically is allowing you to scrape based off of the segmentation, and you have a very simple setup. I try to, again, build the list by a specific angle, and then my goal is to scrape a large quantity of these people in order to run outreach on both LinkedIn and via email. I realize I'm getting like super granular in this stuff. I don't know how much people are picking up. If you really wanted to play this game, I think this is the right setup. Appify is probably the leader in MCPs. MCPs, can't remember what it stands for at the top of my head, but it basically allows you to have like custom APIs that are specific to a very simple use case. Appify probably leads the way in doing that. If anybody here has played with Cursor, you probably know that. So using LinkedIn Navigator, Appify, N8N, and Google Sheets, you can essentially collect anybody and everybody that you would ever want to do business with. I'll put the link to the guy that created this video. I thought it was actually like a really like thoughtful
Hours.
tutorial. Um, I mean, take it for what it is, but this in a nutshell is kind of what I'm describing. I think it's fairly well articulated. Cool. Lots of different ways to scrape with more archaic or old school systems like Texao or Phantom Buster. You'll see inside of Phantom Buster, they still have the recipe for scraping courses, meaning you can define a certain course and then scrape everybody out of it, especially if you're in ed tech and you know that people are taking a specific course that would indicate that they are ideal customer profiles, then I would do that without hesitation. Manual profile collecting, not recommending it, but all of like every tool that does any type of LinkedIn automation has a connection to LinkedIn on a Chrome browser. I can very quickly show what that looks like. It's not the sexiest thing in the world, but it does give you the ability to kind of like as you're browsing, quickly collect somebody. So right now I'm using Wallexly, and you'll see eventually it'll pop up here if I check out somebody. Bum, 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 bum. There it is. So basically, if I wanted to import this person onto a list of alumni, or maybe they're blockchain founders, or whoever my target group is, I could literally import them. And as soon as I do, it triggers an automation connection request that goes out instantly with the tailored structured message of, hey, stop by your profile. So I'll insert the name of their company. is amazing at whatever it is that they do. Then yeah, once they accept, then I have the three follow-ups all lined up. Walaxy is a pretty good tool. It's a newer player on the block, but you get the idea. So that's how I would manually collect. Um, yeah, I'm not going to put you through an activity. Let's move past this stuff. Instant data scraper is the one that I showed that scrapes Apollo. Just want to get past like this. Oh, and the last thing is like I build everything in spreadsheets because that's how most of these things operate in terms of being able to scrape at scale. I realize that I want to leave room for time, so I'm gonna like super rapidly go through doing email outreach because LinkedIn has a glass ceiling. Like you can't get additional LinkedIn profiles anymore. I've tried to build up a bunch of burner profiles, does not work. They have too many 2FA, two-factor authentication stuff. So creating message templates. Let me just quickly go through this. Everything breaks down into decision trees. The whole idea of having a genuine conversation on LinkedIn is out the fucking window. If you know that you're having essentially the same three conversations or 10 conversations with every single person, you should be able to automate most of that. There's different ways of looking at it, but at least the first sequence of sending stuff out on LinkedIn is you send the personalized connection request, the connection is accepted, then you have those three follow-ups. You guys remember that. Why are we templating this stuff? Because I don't want to spend a bunch of time talking to clowns that are not my perfect customers. I only want to talk to the clowns that are willing to buy from me, that are primed and ready at the right moment so I can do what I do best, which is talk about the mission and vision and how fucking awesome my product is. I don't feel it's necessary to rewrite everything, and neither should you. So if we were to build out decision trees, what would that look like? Well, it would look an awful lot like this. Now, there's obviously this kind of looks clown-like to to begin with, but the whole idea is that usually after these three follow-ups, if they do eventually respond, it will either be positive in sentiment, neutral in sentiment, or negative, at which case it will either be, yeah, let's set up a meeting, or, oh, I need to introduce you to this person, I'm not the right guy, or send me your pitch. Or it could be something like, I don't understand what this is, or what are you getting at? I don't fully get why you contacted me. Or it's negative. Fuck off. Don't ever talk to me. How dare you connect with me? I'm kidding. Most people don't do that. Like they wouldn't bother to respond. And if they do like that, then screw them. You're never going to meet them anyways. I tend to use a lot of personalized info when I do the outreach. I could spend an entire course on how I do that. Once you build up a handful of templates, it becomes ridiculously easy to do this. You just have to use a little bit of knowledge, a little bit of experience of how you have these conversations. But honestly, you have these same consistent pathways that happen on decision trees, and it basically is really easy to do that. Man, I'm still not done with this. I'm gonna move on, but Walaxy literally has a free trial. The free trial is, I believe, 14 days. I'm recommending them because honestly, like of all the different tools that I used, I would say it's more rudimentary and simple for those that have not used an automation tool before, but it's also it gives you a free trial, and a lot of these tools do not give you that. So let me find. Bum, bum, bum. Damn, I swear I'm losing my mind. I guess it doesn't matter. I'm gonna skip it if I can't find it. Oh, there it is. Okay, Walaxy. Now, Expandy is the probably premium player on the block. Those are, I would say, probably the best tool if you don't mind spending a couple of extra bucks. I think it's $99 in the low tier, and I would definitely recommend that. Um, Linked Helper is middle grade, and I've used that probably the most because it has proxies that allow you to make sure that you're hiding your IP address, but also, yeah, not getting flagged for being spam. So cool. Last couple of things I'll say on that stuff, and then I have to move on in order to make sure that I get in under time. LinkedIn does have some type of filtering and sorting of the inbox. If you're like me, you get like way too overwhelmed with the amount of messages. You can start adding labels, and that makes things a lot easier. Um, just so we're on the same page with like connections, the average connection acceptance rate is 30%. So if you figured that you're probably going to have to reach I don't know, 100 people in order to get 30 people that are interested in order to convert, let's say 10% of those, 20%, then every 100 connections sorry, every 100 requests that you make, maybe you get five potential customers if done properly and you have everything super optimized. I'm going to move on. Question? Somebody's unmuted. All right, let me jam out on this because I think there's a lot of interesting stuff in here. This is outreach via email, and this is the most scalable way of reaching people. I promise I'll move fast, but I also want to make sure that everybody's on the same page with this. So again, there's fully manual, manual plus tools, and fully automated. The manual, you can guess, is sending out, like, I go into my Gmail and then I send an email. It's like, yep, you sure can. There's manual plus tools, and I use some of these stacks more recently, and I would say they work just fine. Clay is also a new player on the block and basically does a user-friendly version of what you could set up with N8N. If you don't know what you're doing with N8N and you don't feel like you're at that level, um, it's an automation tool, then use Clay. Clay is a little expensive, but for what it does an amazing job. And then there's fully automated where you can literally just run it nonstop. And I've had a few flashes in the pan of using it this way, and it does work. I'll go into each section, but this is kind of like high level, what you need to know. So you need to get a bunch of burner domains and then burner emails that you warm up over time. I'll explain what that means. Then we do targeting and segmentation. You should be an expert in that because you've been listening to me nonstop for forever on that. We'll do some email discovery and validation. We'll create the message templates, and then we'll do sequenced outreach automation. Cool. So, no, you can't just blast hundreds of people or even 100 people a day to totally randoms from your main domain. Do not do this shit. You will have so many frustrations later down the road if you do this. The reason you don't do this is eventually your domain will get flagged. So, any message that you're sending, whether it's an invoice, whether it's a newsletter, whatever it is, it ends up with these messages at the top if they're a G Suite user, or they just get completely filtered out, yeah, totally removed and filtered out if they're using Outlook. So please don't use your main domain to do outreach at scale. It's okay to do it when they have signed up and you are doing inbound responses, but when we're doing cold outreach, do not do this. How do we get around it? The get around is either a done for you model called Instantly, which allows you to register one domain at a time, or I think gives you up to 8 domains at a time, where you can essentially register a similar sounding or similar aesthetic of a name, domain, and then you can have five. I usually keep it around 5 different emails that are then able to send about 40 emails per email address. So you have different burner domains, and under each of these burner domains, you have 5 different emails. If you do enough of this, if you build enough of these, you could literally reach anybody and everybody that you wanted to. Instantly, bang for its buck, is the cheapest platform in town that does this. Huge fan of Instantly. I've been using it for years. Instantly, let me. I'm putting these through like I'm going to get something out of it, but yeah, I honestly I think it's a game changer if you actually figure out how to do this at scale.
They should be sponsoring you.
I've been telling them. No, I'm kidding. But yeah, I wish. So the ideal outreach is about 50 emails per day is what you're kind of aiming for after 2 weeks of keeping it closer to 30. And the whole goal is to just continuously send these messages out to different groups, different target segments, basically. Yes, you can email on a much smaller scale. You don't have to buy 10, 20, 100 domains. I think at my peak with my previous company, I was doing close to 250 domains with 5 emails a piece. And I think at my peak, it was close to like 9,000 emails I was blasting out per day to target potential customers. Just a quick thing on spam statistics: 85% of emails that are sent and received are spam. So, like, you're not going to be alone if you decide you're reaching out to people who have not heard of you. 10.5% of emails end up in the recipient spam folder, and 160 billion spam emails were sent every day. Just so you have it, like, you can look this stuff up. There's lots of people that give these guides. I'm not going to spend a ton of time on it. We've gone over targeting. You don't need to hear it again. You get it. There's different ways of doing it. I try to keep the same clusters or groups or segments separate so that I can figure out, seems like everybody in the SaaS industry loves me, but everybody in AI hates me. Or there's something about people within Texas that really like to buy from me, or whatever the case is. It allows you to get a lot more detailed on your analysis. Why we segment. The whole reason that I'm doing segmentation is one, of course, to be able to find out which targets are the right ones to reach, but it also allows me to use the ability to segment email lists and individualize email campaigns. Messaging are the most effective personalization tactics for 51 and 50% of marketing influencers, respectively. I get so much more value when I tailor my emails, and if I do it by segment, all of the emails that go through this particular sequence are tailored to medium-sized companies that are in EMEA that happen to be within this particular vertical, and they're also director slash C-level technical people. That means CTOs, developers, lead developers, those types. That's the type of detail that I'm trying to get on these different lists in order to unlock and know for certain these are my people. This is my group. Email targeting and discovery. There's lots of different tools for doing that. I mean, do a quick Google search. There's plenty of free trial tools. You can mix and match them. You can do this with an API within N8N or Clay, and that would allow you to validate. The whole reason that we validate emails before sending is because of data decay. Data decay is essentially when you get new lists, and these lists are going out of style because people move jobs or they guess the email. Lots of different things to be said there, but the whole idea is you don't just want to blast without verifying emails. So I always verify the emails before sending them out. I have some type of outreach tracking, whether you're doing this in a more rudimentary way or you're doing it inside of a CRM. Highly recommend the CRM. It would allow you to see at scale your ability to reach these people, what the conversion rates are, and so on and so forth. Let me just move past this message templates and then I can take a pause. So lots of different ways of doing message templates. I'll show you some of mine. So the best templates that I have ever sent out are usually part visual and part meme and are taking some type of creative angle. People get shit in their inbox every single day. And if you're reading like, hello, sir, I would like to sell you my product because we are the number one on Google, the likelihood of somebody responding in a favorable manner is very low. If you get playful on it, if you use memes, and every industry is a little different. If you're a fucking cybersecurity company, you don't have to worry about using memes because people aren't going to get it anyways. So humor really does work out. Now, realize, like if you know your audience and this is not their jam, then fine. But I've found a lot of success being playful, getting weird, creating a adventure scenario where they're the hero or they're potentially allowing me to become their henchman. I have found that to be way more valuable. And even very clever, simple little gifts that make you stand out in a fun way is a way that most people have not been marketed to. And the responses do speak for themselves. So the amount of VCs that I was able to get in touch with, they were like, I don't know what the fuck that was, but that was hilarious. I am willing to sit down with you for 15 minutes. Give me your pitch, but I got to tell you that was the weirdest shit I've ever seen. It's like, thanks, that's perfect. I like to be different. Let's do that 15-minute meeting. So I'm telling you, it does work. Obviously, it you have to match the personality, but it is what it is. The outreach elements as it exists within a template, you have your hook, you have your value demonstration, you have some type of resource reference, maybe a credibility builder, maybe there's some logistics, and an action-oriented CTA. If you found them on a job board, this is maybe a version of a liquid template that you're subbing in the merge fields so that you're able to change everything in green and everything in yellow is about you, tailored specifically to the persona, the niche, and the industry. So the benefits that I sell to a CTO are different than the benefits that I sell to a CMO. I think that makes sense. It's just how you build these things. First line is crucial. I always try to sub in some type of compliment in the first line. There's a bunch of different examples on here that basically are like, oh, I just read the article in insert the name of the publisher. Congrats on insert positive thing that they posted about on LinkedIn within the last 90 days. All of these things can be automated. It's super easy to do. Cool. Sequenced outreach. is as straightforward as it gets if you use any of the outreach tools, whether it's Instantly, Apollo, Snovio. It gives you the ability to send one email instantly and then follow ups until they respond. Really simple stuff. It looks like this in terms of the interface. If you have not used one of these things, you can look it up online. It's super easy to build these out. Apollo does the same thing. I would say Apollo's claim to fame is that they also do data alongside outreach, and that's why people like them. I'm going to pause. I feel like there's just way too much stuff to cover. I tried to get it all in, but how'd I do? 183 slides. No, no, actually,
Wait, more.
They are like
yeah.
267.
Well, I mean, that's pretty close. I would say like there's not a whole lot else I need. You know what? One I will recommend is use Streak. I really like those guys. Streak is a fantastic tool for being able to see if people read your message, but then don't respond. That's the last slide I'll get into on this.
Thank you, Taylor. It's a lot of content to digest, to be honest with you, but it's very informative. I love the tools. There's so many tools. Is there some kind of maybe compiled version of the tools that you recommend that maybe we can have access to?
Yeah, I'll definitely I'll try to condense down what I've gone over. And yeah, I can send that later. The problem is like
Yeah. Go ahead, go ahead.
everything's interconnected, right? So yeah,
Yeah,
I
yeah.
have like my outreach tools, which is cool. But yeah, this is actually for my upcoming course, but there's nothing in here. So yeah, you get the outreach tools. Fucking there we go.
Thank you. Yeah, but regardless, I think after these days, maybe you can share with me whatever you're comfortable sharing, and
Sure.
it would be easier for me to, spread them out with the cohort and the alumni. But yeah, apart from that, I don't know if anybody here has any questions for Taylor.
I know that was a lot.
It was a lot,
Well, I looked at the calendar invite. I'm like,
but
they want me to do 2 hours. I'm not sure they're ready.
yeah, but no, it's very informative. I really enjoyed the presentation. I love the memes too. It's it's refreshing to see the memes
Thanks, man.
throughout the presentation. But I do have a question. I'm curious about in terms of let's say the startups. Not everybody, let's say, has the budget to use certain tools or like for outreach. How do you recommend that different companies with different budgets approach this?
So there are always workarounds. So with Apollo, you're given up to, I believe, 250 credits each month. I actually have that. I'll share my screen again. So inside of the document that I just put into the chat a moment ago, it gives you basically the credit breakdown. So if
Okay.
if you didn't want to spend any money, you literally could daisy chain from one to the next to the next. Um, I
Okay.
wouldn't necessarily say that that's the best way to do it, but it is one way to do it.
Nice. Okay. Okay.
So, like same with email discovery tools. Like you would potentially be able to do, yeah, 250 on Apollo and then jump over to Lead Leaper and then to,
Okay.
but like after a certain point, like you are spending a lot more time manually, but yeah, it really depends on your circumstances, of course.
I do have another question. So we have many startups from different markets. So since now they're here in Malta, they're interested, let's say, in like moving to the European customers, like mainly Maltese customers. How do you recommend that they adopt their strategies in terms of outreach, for example, in the US market compared to the European market?
I don't think there's a massive difference. I mean, to be honest, so like I've worked with a lot of ed tech companies in the past, the different accelerator. And of course, like everybody's like, oh, we want to enter the US market. And it's like, well, okay, just be aware that education in the US is significantly slower when it comes to adoption of any new technology. So your first goal should be getting a pilot project, but you're not going to get a pilot project through any public school because they go through a vetting process which requires that either they're US based or they've been around, which means you have to go through a tendering process. And then by the time you're on the other side of that, you're looking at 18 months, which we can't really do. So I would not target for that type of situation until I know with absolute certainty that it's attainable. Little victories go a long fucking way. And I've seen a lot of the startups that are here, there's not a lot of social proof on the website. What a lot of people that are in some of these very easy to disrupt and old school industries, no offense for anybody that is an educator, is that they are really risk averse and they need a lot of trust in order to get into something. That comes in the form of reviews, that's shitloads of logos on the website, that comes in lots of trust signals. So like we've worked with these companies, we've worked with these education institutions. If that does not exist on your website, it needs to be there in order to give that trustworthiness. And even if it's not even real, right? Like I used to recommend this person does not exist. Now, now like we can do that without needing to get on a website like this. Like, this is Sandra. She's a third grade teacher, absolutely loves our product. And it's like, great. Every time you hit refresh, it's a new testimonial. There's Gary, eighth grade teacher. He's been using our tool for the last 10 years. You name it, there's a different way to get there. I don't think there's any major difference in entering the US market or the Danish market. I think everybody has a their first, their country first sensibility. I I kind of ran into this in Denmark where it's like, fuck out of here. Like, hey, like, American pro at like doing all things related to growth hacking. And there's a weird version of American exceptionalism that does not gel well, shocker, with anybody. So if you come in and compliment them and tell them how wonderful their education system is and how important it is that they're on top of things and how great they are, then they're like, yeah, I am great. That's maybe your back door in. But yeah, I wish
Okay,
I had a
okay.
better answer for you. It's tough.
No, no, it's a very good answer, man. There's nothing wrong with it. I don't know if anybody have any more questions. Anybody? No raise of hands. I think yes, we have Tom.
Yeah, hey guys. Thank you, Taylor. Really enjoyed the presentation.
Thanks.
And I was looking for something technical, so the granular stuff was good, at least for me.
Awesome.
Um, there's obviously loads of levers that you can pull, right? There's loads of channels available to you. I just wondered, I have a question and then maybe a follow-up question. So first of all, do you find, you're obviously really experienced, that your intuition about which of these levers is generally going to work in a situation is correct? Or is it still, even now for you, a bit of a matter of trial and error, experimentation, seeing what works, seeing what doesn't?
Yeah, it's a good question. Man, I get shit wrong every day. And the great way of being able to learn is that you are proving yourself wrong. Of course, we all have our hunches on what's going to work best, but being able to rapidly iterate and change directions and test on some type of level playing field gives you the certainty to keep going. I think what happens is a lot of people do the right thing for too long and don't try to either massage the messaging or pivot or change it up a little bit in order to find out, like, wow, I was getting two or three major opportunities a week. Now I'm getting two or three a day because I actually instituted this, I optimized it, and I continue to scale it. So it really depends. But yeah, I mean, use your gut to start with for sure.
Okay, well, that's good. Thank you. That opens up my second question then, because given that answer, I wondered if you had any maybe juicy examples of runaway successes you've had, that you were a bit of a Hail Mary or you didn't know would work or not, or conversely anything that seemed like a dead cert and then failed. Of course, I would let you choose which of those examples you wanted to give.
Yeah, I mean, so when we were doing this gluten-free VIP thing, the terrible app that was for gluten-free allergens things, a viral runaway thing was basically a blog post about how kids were getting high on gluten-free flour, and I mean, it took off, right? Like, not real, obviously, totally fake, but lots of backlinks, which was really powerful and ultimately increased our organic growth. Didn't do a lot for us commercially, not that anything would have, because it was a terrible product. But yeah, sometimes those weird angles tend to work out, but also I think that you have to have some of the tried and true techniques that I've kind of kind of gone over here. I wish there was a magic bullet, but sometimes it's just a matter of building up these different channels, and consistency kind of wins overall.
All right, thank you. That's great.
Sure.
I'll steer clear of gluten-free products in the future too.
Noted.
All right, guys, any final questions before we conclude the workshop? No. If any of you is comfortable with, like opening their camera so that maybe I can take a screenshot and then share it on LinkedIn and whoever's around. All right, I'm gonna take the screenshot soon. All right, 3, 2, 1, smile. Perfect, perfect. Thank you. Thank you very much, Taylor. I really appreciate the time and the presentation. As I mentioned, it is a little bit, a lot of content to digest, but it was very helpful. I'm sure the tools are also very helpful. I'm very interested in exploring them myself. Yeah, but I think if there's anything that you need from our side, you just email me, or if I can help you with anything. And I will also be waiting for any kind of content that you would like to share with us, so I can share it with the cohort and the alumni. But yeah, thank you guys very much for being here, and I wish you a very good evening.
Cool. Thanks, guys. Hopefully I'll meet you soon. Sorry I didn't make it this year. Thanks.
All right. So